I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. Today we're working on our gourd called Fall Surprise, and this is a wonderful fall gourd with really colorful leaves. We're going to make these leaves out of QuikWood, and then we're going to paint our leaves in several layers to really give them that colorful look as well as that kind of crisp fall feel. We're going to cut out the inside of our gourd, and it's also interchangeable with different stones as well. So there's a lot to this, so let's get started. Okay, our supply list, we're going to start with a clean gourd cut with at least a 3-inch neck. And that's a bottle gourd, and then you're going to use the black flat spray on the inside of it. When you're cutting, you always want to use your N95 rated mask to make sure you don't have any of the bad fumes come in. We're going to be using QuikWood, and depending on how much you do, like this simple one here, we only have a few leaves, so that would be very little QuikWood. Mine that I added tons of leaves and tons of acorns ended up being 2.5 of the big QuikWood, so that's up to you. A stone, if you wanted to put a stone, if you didn't want to place a stone in there, don't worry about it. But we've got all kinds of stones at miriamjoy.com, and also the QuikWood can be purchased there as well. And you could also make it interchangeable, so that's something to think about. I used a little bit of a sanding pad, and I used a circle drill bit to cut through the gourd. The art eraser, or Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. One of my favorite wax tools is my business card, a laminated business card. If you wanted it a little bit thicker, you could use like a hotel key or a credit card. We used a little bit of E6000 if we needed it, as well as our plastic gloves when we are coloring and varnishing. I used in this several of the cotton rounds, so that's something to think about. Our wax paper when we're working with our clay. I also used my stabilizer to set my gourd on while I was working so it didn't move around. However you wanted to color it, we've got leather dyes. Now remember, with the leather dye though, it's going to come off on your hands as you're working with it, so you might not want to do that as much as maybe the alcohol dyes or anything like that. I used Bombay. This is a permanent ink. I used Crimson from Dr. Martin, P.H. Martin's, and I also used the sepia color, I'm probably not saying that right, as well as a couple of my alcohol inks, my browns, like my espresso and ginger. And those are whatever you have, whatever you want to use. I used Inca Gold, and this was the yellow gold. This is an optional item, as well as the gold pigment powder. I'm going to use it, but you do not have to use it in the project. I use Color Float, as well as a different variety of brushes. I use angles to float with, but you can use straights. I had a little bit smaller straight one, as well as a round and a liner brush. And those are basically the general ones, but always tell you to use what you have as well. To put on the pigment powder, I used an old scruffy brush or a mop brush, and that one is optional again. Some of the miscellaneous tools I used, if you were going to use the wire to hold the stone, is the wire and a wire cutting tool and a bottlenose tweezers, and then some pliers here as well. We used, for most of our clay tools, we used the wax design tools. These are the number 2 and number 3, which are Miriam Joy products, as well as a bead reamer, our scissors, whatever you're going to hang it with. If you decide not to use the wire, you can use wax linen, you can use black sinew, whatever you want. If you'd rather use a clay tool instead of like the business card, you can use a clay tool. I have a palette, a paint palette, but you could also use the wax paper if you wanted to as well. I had a white charcoal pencil and my hobby knife to cut with, a container for water, a plate to put, plastic plate to put my color on, and then I wash it afterwards, as well as a natural sea sponge and a dowel roller. If you don't have one of those, you send us an email and we will get one up on the website for you to purchase. We have our varnish, which is either satin or matte, that's up to you. And I use the alcohol to clean off the QuikWood with. This percentage of alcohol wouldn't be as important as if you were doing the alcohol inks, and I just keep mine in a spray bottle so it's easier for me to use. We used a vegetable spray, which don't you love my bottle? People always say, what's the difference between vegetable spray and Pam? There is none. It's just vegetable spray, oil, any of those kind of things. And then most of the colors that I use today, all up here. I did not use white or black in that. I've got those pulled, but I did not use it. I used mostly burnt umber, which is the darkest of the brown before black. A medium brown. This one happens to be nutmeg. A spring green. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about the colors, and I'll also talk to you about brands. I don't worry about brands. You can see I probably have 3 or 4 different brands here in myself. A bright red, like a fire engine red, an Empire or straw gold, a golden brown, ivory, a Christmas green, and a metallic gold, an orange or a pumpkin, a purple, and an ivory. So those are our basic supplies. I'm sure we'll bring in and add a few more here and there, but that should help you to get all your supplies go and should give us a pretty good start. For this gourd, we're going to be using a bottle gourd or a Chinese bottle gourd. You want to make sure that it's probably at least 2.5 to 3 inches tall up on the upper part so you can put the leaves going up. But that's kind of a personal preference. If you didn't want any going up, you could do it on a gourd that was round. That's totally up to you. The first thing we want to do is take it outside and spray the inside black, and I'm just using the 98-cent flat black that I can pick up from Walmart that's real inexpensive. I don't worry about getting the edges. If you do get it on the edges, you can use your art eraser and just erase that back off, but we're going to cover those up with acrylic paint once we get going. If you've ever taken any of my DVD classes or seen any of my DVD classes, I shoot them in sections, and the reason being is you don't watch the whole DVD and then say, oh, what do I start with, what do I do next? So I do a section and stop and wait for you to do that and then take you on to the next section, and that is the reason that we do it that way. For this piece, instead of doing the wax design, I decided that I really wanted a stone, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But if you wanted a wax design, we have a basic wax video that shows you the techniques, and we'll put that link up for you. And then we also have some free black and white patterns where you can find any of these designs on there and just go through them until you find the one you like. I stuck with the basic colors on this one. This was purple with a little bit of white in it, orange, red, dandelion, and then just yellow green. So on this one I used inchworm and mac and cheese, which are kind of specialty colors, and then just the brown and the dandelion. But you could just change those off for the yellow green and then the yellow orange as well. So there's a lot of options over there with the black and white patterns. Just decide on what colors you would want, and you would need to leave your leaves big enough area for whatever design. I would say put the basic pattern of the design on so you know where to stay around from. But on this one we're going to go ahead and do our stone, and we'll show you how we do that. Once the paint's dried on the inside of your gourd, the first thing we want to kind of do is decide on where you want the front to be. So kind of take a look at it, decide where you think that sits the nice and that you have the nicest area. Now we have all types of beautiful stones at Miriam Joy, and these are just some of my favorite, which I thought would be beautiful to use in this project. And these are very inexpensive on our site, and you can see how you can see through them. And I just thought it would be really awesome to put these onto the gourd. And what I wanted to do, since this guy is giving me a little bit harder time to hold on to, use your painter's tape and tape around him and draw his basic shape on, and then go out about 1/4 of an inch with the basic design and cut that with your gourd saw, and then you have that stone hanging down and shining through. Now remember, this gourd is a little bit at an angle, so it's going to hang more flat. So think about that when you're working on picking your spot as well as your gourd too. So depending on where this top part is, that is kind of where your stone is going to hang. It's not going to sit. You could just sit it in and just carve it in. So that's really up to you what you want to do. I decided on mine because I'm going to use this beautiful, kind of reminds me of snowflakes, purple one that I found a saw drill bit, circle bit, and that fits really nice within that. So I'm just going to use that instead of using my other saw. And we do have our little circle drill bit kit at our site. So we're going to assemble our bits all together, but the first thing we want to do is take our Allen wrench and tighten this up so that our bit doesn't slide around on us. If you have it and it's just spinning, this needs to be tightened. So that is real important. So now we're going to assemble this, and this will go right on the front so that we can drill with our gourd just like that. And then we're going to put our lug nut on. And get that nice and tight. And that did make a difference if I had it one way over the other. And if you need to take your pliers and tighten it, you can take both on each end and tighten it a little bit more, and then put it into your bit. When we're drilling, sanding, anything with your gourd where the dust is flying, make sure you have your N95 rated mask. This is my mask that I use when I am working, so that is real important. I also use my cotton balls in my ears to keep irritants out from there. If you have any allergies, that may be something you want to do. I'm going to use my stabilizer. I'm going to turn it upside down just to hold this in place to give me a little bit more stability. You You also could use your rubber placed gloves if you wanted to. And I am going to aim straight from there and go right into that hole.
Go ahead.
Okay, we are through. So go ahead, and sometimes you have to get a poker and poke through these holes to remove this center bit. Save those, turn those into jewelry or charms or all that kind of fun stuff. So now that we have this, we want to clean this out from the inside if there's stuff you missed. So get that all nice and cleaned out. Was looking at even my ovals, that would be pretty with the circle as well, so you wouldn't have to worry about cutting it with your gourd saw. There's nothing wrong either way, whatever you would decide. I sanded a little bit along the edges and then take a look inside, and you may need to spray paint it again with black. The reason we didn't spray paint is because of the holes, it'll go everywhere if you're spraying down this way. You would want to tape it over or anything, but I'm just touching up right there. So once we're done with that, we're just going to take any type of black acrylic paint, it doesn't matter what brand, and we're going to paint our edges on the circle all the way around and the rim. If you get any, just wipe it up. And once you get that done, then we'll color our gourd. I decided to do mine red because you want something that's going to show your leaves off very well. So think about something that's going to accentuate like the browns and the yellows and oranges and greens. This one is red, but it got a little bit more brown into it. And so just it does not matter what color you, or how I do it, but how you want to do it. So really kind of explore your options. On this one, I thought I would use, this is Dr. P.H. Martin's. This is Bombay. This is India ink. You can find this at your craft stores. And I love this stuff. It's different. It's got a real unique smell. I will warn you about that. It's not real strong. It's just different. And it's a permanent ink, so it works a little bit different. You could use ink dyes, you could use alcohol inks, there's all kinds of things you can use. I always start with my alcohol round, or excuse me, my cotton round, and I always start at the bottom and work my way up. I'm going to do probably 2 to 3 layers. Now another thing I was kind of looking for but I didn't find, what I will do a lot of times is I will take my red leather dye and I will do a coat of that, and then I will do my alcohol inks over the top of those. What that does, it locks in the color, but it gives it that real bright richness that I like. And so that's something to think about if you ever wanted to real bright, vibrant color like we're going to end up getting here as well, but with the alcohol inks and the leather dyes. That way it has the richness, and then when you put the alcohol inks over it, it doesn't fade as fast. So that is one of the things that I do quite a bit. I've got 2 colors on here, but you want to make sure that that first color is really dry before you start that color. Otherwise, you'll start to lift it up. So it's real important that you let it dry in between. And I'm keeping the same cotton round because it's really got a lot of color in it. And I know you could stop and get a new one if you wanted to. And I don't think I told you the color I used was crimson. So it's our nice deep red. And I want one more layer on it. And you can also use your heat gun or embossing tool to drive it in between coats. I'm putting my third coat on, And one of the things I really like about this color as well is it gets a real shiny coat to it. And you get this real nice brightness with it. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on and let that dry real good. And then we'll start with our next step. I'm going to do a technique on this I call color feathering. And again, if you were doing it like the red leather dye, you may want to use burgundy leather dye, kind of a deeper color. On this one, I am going to try sepia. I don't know how to say this. So that's a brown. I wanted to try, there was a Van Dyke color brown, but unfortunately it dried up on me. So I'm going to try this a little bit of a brown. Now what I do is I put it in the middle of my cotton round, and then I simply take the color and the first layer I'm going to sponge that out to about a third of the gourd left. And don't be afraid, if you're using a leather dye or an alcohol inks, it's not going to be as thick as this is. So this is going to be a little bit thicker, and that's why I'm reloading. So, but you want the kind of wispy ends is what you are after. And I'm just going to bring that around even to that hole there, and we're just going to come down through the hole once we get there. And you can see this is not as shiny going on the first time. Now, if you are doing leather dye or alcohol inks, I wouldn't tell you to go over that a second time, but because this is a little bit duller, we're going to go over this a second time. Here are wonderful birds in the background there. It's our neighborhood crow. That's also going to darken it up just a little bit. But again, make sure that first layer is dry before you go on that second layer. Okay, so it's not real bright, but it's enough, and that's perfect. So now this next layer, we're going to come down, and you can do 2 or 3 depending on how big your gourd is, and mine isn't as wide on this one, so I'm just going to do 2 of the layers here. So this one we're going to come about halfway down now. And try to feather those edges out when you stop. And you could do anything you wanted though. If you would rather have kind of different colors just by using your alcohol inks, then do that. Now we're going to flip this over. And we're going to come up towards that edge, but again, we want to leave some of it untouched so we can have that difference there. And you go down clear to that neck and start it out of there so we don't have an area that looks like we didn't color it. Now because this is a brand new coat, I'm going to do 2 on it again, like I did that bottom layer, just to darken it up just a tad. We didn't have to do that on the second one because it had layers underneath it. but try to whisk that out as much as you possibly can. And that part wasn't dry and it lifted that paint off, so be careful with that again, like we talked about. Make sure you don't have one real high edge and one real low edge. I've got mine just a little bit lower right in that area. So I'm just gonna sponge that just a little bit. Okay, let that dry real well, and I'm going to put a little bit of gold on it. A lot of people ask me how I color things or the method I use, and I tell them I use everything including the kitchen sink. And I want to just play with some different things so you can kind of see. Don't be afraid to mix and match your different dyes and colors and paints. I'm going to go to alcohol inks now, and I'm going to use espresso, and I want to use just enough to kind of run down and give it that rich dark brown look, and I'm barely putting it on there, so I want it to go right about there. If it starts to run too much, you can always hit it with your embossing gun as well and make it stop. So that's something to think about, but I'd rather keep adding a little bit. So let's hit that real quick, and that's how you stop it. And I want to just add a couple of these. I'm going to keep my gun kind of handy here because it's going to go up and over that one. That's fine. I'm going to try and not do them real even because I have a tendency to do them even. But that's just another dimension to the board. Actually, I would like just a tiny bit more. There we go. Let's try running it down, see if that works. Nope, just dries it right up. So, you also could drop a little bit of alcohol into it with an eyedropper, and it would even run. I may do that just so we can kind of see what it looks like. Want that one closer. That one long and that one shorter, so we have a different variety here. And it's going to follow the edge when you do those. Anytime they hit those and go around, so we probably, if we want to, one here, we kind of need to hit it so it doesn't go around. So it will. That edge, instead of coming down and stopping, it'll go around. So we got a couple, just one more probably right there. And then I'm going to flip it over, and I may just stick in the same way I started instead of doing them different. I think I'll just take them down. So this is just going to be just a little bit. You can kind of control that by how much you turn that gourd. So like stop that one right there. So if you want it to run, turn it straight up and down. If you want it to stop, then rock it back the other way. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this around the top and be done with that. So one of the other things I want to just do a little bit of, this is Inca Gold. and this is Yellow Gold. The Inca Gold is the brand. It's by Viva. I have found these. You're going to find these are in scrapbooking section. I found mine at Joann's, and they're a wax product, and I put mine on with my fingers, and we don't want to put a lot. We want just kind of a thin film coating, because you don't want to have it thick that you can't put anything else over it. So that's kind of, and you can even go over the lines if you want. I did try a little bit of alcohol, and because our base isn't alcohol, it didn't do much, but see how that's kind of giving that a little bit of metallic look, and I really like that. I may come in and rub just a little bit over, like right in here, areas like that. Just kind of play with it a little bit. I don't want the lines as much. Trying to get that more of just a rub-on thing instead of a line somewhere. But I'm just doing it real simple. And then I keep a cotton swab, or you could even just do a piece of paper towel with your alcohol in there to keep that from drying up. I might even actually try some rubbing alcohol in my cottoned round. That should hold that nice and tight and keep that from drying out on me. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I did come back in here, and I'm taking my alcohol and I'm rubbing this off a little bit just to lighten that up, and I like that look better. It's not quite as stark. This is the 91% alcohol, and I'm just going over those lines that were so dark. And you may just like the feathering technique and just stop there. That may be what I just like the different techniques, and I just play with it until I get it. And like I said, I always leave these things in because I want you to see that I don't get it perfect the first time out either. Let's see how much better that already looks. I like that looks so much better. It just kind of blended it in and gives it the more textured look on the bottom. I did go back and add a little bit more gold, and I just kind of work it till you get it the way you like it. It's kind of more muted now than it was standing out. So just however you think that should work. Now I do want to go ahead and hit it with the embossing gun because I do have the alcohol inks on there. So if you use that alcohol inks, we want to go ahead and set that. We're going to be putting on our oak leaves with QuikWood, and it works like a clay, but it's actually an epoxy wood putty, so anything you do to wood you can do to the QuikWood. The reason I like to work with QuikWood is because it's rock hard. In an hour it stops really moving after 30 minutes. Sometimes depending on your weather it can be a little bit quicker than that, so only work off the amount that you're working with. But rock hard means rock hard even in your jewelry, so one of the first things that we want to do is remove our jewelry. There are some rules and different things in here. I always tell you to open this up and follow those different things that they recommend so that you know everything about the QuikWood. So we say that it's 2 pieces of epoxy that you combine, and there are your 2 pieces. You have the light and the darker epoxy. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our vegetable spray. This is any type of vegetable spray. You can use Pam, anything like that. Just to a simple vegetable spray, and then I'm also just going to do my scissors a little bit. Now we're going to cut a workable piece on there, and probably about 1/2 inch for a leaf. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to put this lid right back on. Now because I'm going to use it so much, I'm not going to put it back in the container, but put it back in the container, put the lid on to store it. That's real important. We do have a piece of plastic, and you do not take it off until we get it cut, because we don't want to take it all off of this tubing because we don't want it to dry out on us. But this is really, really, really important. I can't tell you how many times I have done this class, and I'll have a student ask me what is wrong with their leaf, and they forgot to remove the plastic. So think about that. Make sure every piece you remove the plastic. Now to activate this, we're going to knead it. And this is a really, really important step. It has to be kneaded very well. It's kneaded so it's not marbleized. It is all one color, and it starts to get warm to the touch. Those are all important things. See, it's still marbleized here. So the reason we did the vegetable spray is so it does not stick to our hands. You can also use a little tiny bit of water, but by a little bit, I mean just putting it on your finger and then doing it. I only use that to smooth it down because I think that it happens to speed up the drying process when I do it. Now, so we've got it all one color, and I can feel it starting to get warm. So I'm going to take my vegetable spray and put it on my wax paper. And I'm just going to spread that around so I have a workable area. And I'm going to kind of put this in a longer thing here. This is just a wider dowel. Do we have any of those? So we do have some of those. If you need some of those, just send us an email at art@miriamjoy.com, and we can see if we could sell you one of those. And we want our leaves a little bit thicker. We don't want them too thin. And I always tell people to look at leaves, the oak leaves, or go and Google them on your computer and see what different kind of shapes that you have. Remember, every leaf is different from the other one. So think about that as you are making them. And we want to do them a little bit different here. I want a small one here, and I want two bigger ones here. So I want to start out with my little bit smaller one there. And we're just going to cut that shape out. Now you could actually come in and cut a pattern if you need to have a pattern. Print out a pattern on your computer, or go find an oak leaf, set it down on top of your clay, and do that. But it's really not as hard as you make it. So don't make it so hard. I just kind of go in and out, but you want the top and bottom to be smaller, and then the leaves to be wider on the ends. So I kind of have that shape there, and I'm going to take it and put it up here, and I'm simply going to lay it onto my gourd. There is nothing on that to hold it on except for the wet clay. Now this little piece right here, I'm going to take it with my wax paper, and I'm going to put it into a corner and cover it up to kind of help it not to dry out till I use it again. You shouldn't have a lot of that, just a little bit. We'll show you what we're going to do with that in a minute. Now I'm going to be using some of my Miriam Joy wax tools, and this is where they really come in nice. This is my number 2 tool. You also could use the number 3, which is bigger. And what I'm simply doing is kind of bringing those edges up on each of those leaves in the corners. And then I'm also going to take this, and I'm just going to kind of roll it. You're not really going to push it. You're going to kind of roll it down. And what that does is kind of gives that a wider, more impressed middle or center. And then we want to come out with our veins a little bit here. We're going to do something else to these two. This is not all we're doing to them. But my thing to you is don't make them harder than they are. That is kind of important. We want to make sure that our edges are nice and smooth as possible. Might even try smoothing those out a little bit before we put them on. Now I take an embossed business card because it's nice and thin, but it's thick. We won't tell this person that we're using her business cards. And I am going to take this and put this down the middle and push it in. If you can't get it, because we're a little bit of an angle, just rock that and get that line in. And then we're also going to put our veins right down the middle. Now you also can use like a hotel key or a credit card if you want them a little bit thicker. And we'll show you what those. I like the business card better personally. I think it's kind of got a nice shape to it. I'm going to take my smaller tool here and just push those edges in just a little bit where there may be sticking out. You also could kind of trim it off with your hobby knife if you wanted to. But there is our first one. And like I said, don't make it harder than it is. One thing, I like to do a class after I've done it, that way I don't forget things. And I had been working on this a while and I kind of remembered how come my edges were so rough. So I want to give you this earlier in the video so you can do it with the smoother edges. And what I did instead of cutting it is I simply just rolled it out and I just made my shape just by taking my tool and pushing it in with the leaves, and that gives you the smooth edges. And then just add a little bit of water on your clay tool, pull that down. Don't push hard. Shouldn't be pushing that hard. I need a little bit more water here. But you shouldn't have water running off of it. It should be, I just hit it on my paper towel or something like that. And then we take our business card and we press it down. Not only is that going to make it easier, it's going to make it easier when you go to paint it as well. All of the little parts and stuff are on the edges will be so much easier to paint. So that is one of the reasons I want to go back and correct that and show you how to do it on the edges, and you get the nice smooth edges. Now we're going to cut our second piece off. Now I want a little bit bigger leaf here. So I'm going to try and cut off a little bit more. Find my roll here, that plastic layer. There it is. Okay, and again we're going to do the same thing. Now, if this guy is still workable and not starting to harden up very much, take him and work him into that piece. And then he'll last a little bit longer that way, and you lose it. Then I'll show you also another thing we're going to do with our extra items here. And we're also not going to lay all of these flat. We don't want all of these flat. In fact, I think I'm going to stand this guy up a little bit right here. I don't want these just sitting on here nice and flat. And a lot of times what I'll do is just come in underneath them with that tool and pick that up just a little bit. See how much better that even is right there? I'm going to do just a little bit right there, just so we don't have a flat leaf. Because even when the leaves are on the ground and they're drying, they're not usually flat. So I'm going to press that back up there. And again, clean this guy up just a little bit. We're going to paint that too, and it probably won't show up much, but okay, so we've almost got this guy ready to go. So get all your lines out. Make sure you don't have any lines on there. Start out with a little bit of an oblong, and want to make sure we get them wide enough and long enough. I think that looks like a nice one. I'll probably start this thinner point up here with to make it my top. We're just going to come in here and make 2 or 3 of these kind of bobble things here and end up with a point at the end. And do the same on the other side. And they can be wider. And you can do 2 on one side, whatever you kind of feel that you need. I think I'm going to take that one down like that there. Now these are more long instead of fat, like some of our other leaves, like maple leaves and different things, are fatter. These are not as fat. I'm just going to take my finger this time and I'm going to push all of those corners, uneven clay kind of in a little bit. Just smooth them. This is where you could use just a tad of water and just kind of smooth that out. So I want to come in here and I want to lay this to the side of this piece. And again, we're going to start by bringing in the little end parts. And I'm going to roll this down the middle. And it just helps indent that a little more. And if you didn't like that, you can leave that part out. What I'm trying to do is put one down the middle of here, a little bit at an angle, and one in between, because I think just those by themselves is not quite enough of the veins. So that's kind of what I'm doing, just to give you an idea. And again, with the business card, we've got this little roll here. Don't be afraid to use your hobby knife if you can't get into some of those areas to get the vein in there as well. I'm going to start out with that, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to rock that guy all the way to the end. And I try not to take these to the edge. Trying to take them almost to the edge, but not quite. But start them up at that middle vein, definitely. And I really can't tell you how much QuikWood you're going to use, because it's going to be on how big your gourd is, how many leaves you do. different things like that. I can tell you probably use between 1 and 2. It's just going to be however many you decide to do. So again here, I'm going to kind of pick these up and give them a little bit of movement just so that they're not laying flat. So some of these I'll definitely do more than others. I'm going to come back and kind of, I think that's what really makes them look like leaves, is when I do that with my number 2 tool or my number 3 tool. Now, I've got this guy right here, and we need to start thinking about our acorns. So these smaller pieces like this, I'm going to kind of leave for acorns, because that way they start to dry, because it's so much easier to do these once they've started to dry. And I don't want to do them quite in a circle. I want them just a little bit of an oblong, and that shape right there is perfect. I want you to go ahead and get those first couple on, and then we're going to start to do a few more.